In this video, we will take a look at the RStudio interface. I will show you how to orient yourself in the software, and I will also show you what the most important features of RStudio are. But before we can dive right into the program, I want to clarify where we are in the R programming landscape. You need to know that there are alternatives to RStudio, and you can even work without RStudio. RStudio is a GUI, that is a graphical user interface. As the name indicates, this interface makes it graphically appealing to work with R. In other words, RStudio makes your life much easier. For the most part, it's a click interface. That means the basic commands can be done without code, only with mouse clicks. Those are commands like opening or storing your script, import or export of CSV files, package management, and even the help features. All of those tasks are universal in R. No matter if you work in finance, marketing or science, you have to perform those tasks. When everybody uses it, it makes perfect sense to simplify it as much as possible. RStudio is free for the individual user. There are proprietary versions for business use, but most of you will run open source RStudio. I already said that RStudio is a GUI, which also means that it sits on top of another program. In our case, this program is R. If you open R itself, you would get a window like this one over here, which is the console. You can instantly see that this one does not look so user-friendly. There are a few things that can be done via mouse clicks, but it is much less than in RStudio. When you want to run R directly in the console, you will have to code nearly anything yourself. Since I know that for many of you guys, R is your first and probably the only programming language in your life, let's make it as easy as possible. And let's make use of as much support as available. Life is complicated enough, so at least RStudio is on our side. Let's go back to RStudio. It is not the only GUI. There are alternatives out there, like the R Commander. In some of my courses, I am also using this GUI. The difference between RStudio and R Commander is that R Commander focuses on a few topics like statistics and graphics. These are very well implemented, better than in RStudio. The problem, however, with R Commander is that it relies on RBase for the most part. Implementing add-on material is not that easy. Furthermore, the interface itself is not as user-friendly as RStudio. Many people use RStudio and provide feedback, therefore it just must be good. To put it in a nutshell, 95% of the times R is run via RStudio. Alright, so now that you know that this interface is not R itself but the graphical user interface, we can take a look at those 4 windows in RStudio. Of course, there is a system behind those windows. It might look a bit confusing when you have those different fields, but don't worry, it's actually quite simple to understand what those are about. Basically, we have the upper left window, which is the script section. This is where you do the coding. Since 2015, you have a code checker also integrated here. At the lower left field, we have the console. That is the analog to the R console we already saw. That is the place where the actual calculation takes place. The code is sent from the script section to the console when you run it with this tool over here. This is also where you will find your results. Theoretically, you could also write the code in here directly, but that does not make a lot of sense because it would be hard to manipulate and correct the code in the console. At the right upper window, we have the environment. It's an important field, but it gets overlooked so often by the beginner. Keep one thing in mind and never ever forget it. This is the place where all your objects you created in a given R session are listed. Here you can see what you have already calculated. You can orient yourself where you are in your work schedule, a very important field. And down here, lower right corner, we have 5 tabs at once. Files lets you organize all the files you create, store or import into RStudio. It is nice to have, but you can do without this field. The next one is the Plot tab. Each time you produce a plot, and you will produce tons of them in R, this field will open and the graph is displayed. You can export them here with this tool. And you can scroll back and forth between your plots with those 2 buttons over here. And you can clean out useless graphs with this button. So that was the Plot tab. And now we will check out the most important tab in the lower right window. It is the Package tab. This is where you will manage your packages. It's a list of all the packages you have already installed on your machine. If you do not yet have the package on your computer, you can click here on Install. And in the window, you can then state the name of the package you want to download. Let's go back to the list. Basically, you have different types of libraries. Here we have the user libraries, which are all the add-on packages I have downloaded myself over months and years. They do not come with your installation of R and RStudio like the system library. Packages in this list you already have on your machine since they come automatically with RBase. Note that when you have an add-on package, a user library like this one over here, you need to activate it. You cannot use all the functions in the library if you do not have it activated. You just need to tick this box over here and you're ready to go. This is extremely simple with RStudio. It works without a single line of code. The next tab is the Help tab, which is nearly as important as the Packages tab. You would go to this tab if you want to find out more about the specific function, or you can even get user manuals about R. Each R function in each package has documentation available. That means you can learn how the function is structured, which arguments you can use in the function, and what the output will look like. Understanding how to use the help function is very important and can save you plenty of time. The last tab is the viewer, which I will omit here since you will likely not use it at the beginner's level. So now that we took a quick tour around the RStudio interface, we will take a look at a simple R scripting work step. You will instantly see how the different fields seamlessly work together. And you will also see why so many data professionals enjoy the RStudio user experience. The first thing you should do when you start your work is to create a script if you do not yet have an empty new one. It's the same thing in Excel. You open Excel, you get the worksheet, and you store it right away. This makes sure you do not lose your work for any odd reason. In RStudio, we simply click on this plus sheet over here and we're gonna select our script. This now opens a second script here in the script field. It is now untitled and we could simply delete it again by clicking this X over here. To save the script, we click this disk and select a location on our computer. And then we need to name it. In this case, I'm simply calling it test. With the extension .r, you can tell that this is an R script. Alright, so now that we have our script created, we can start coding. Coding in R most of the times means creating objects. In this case, we are creating the object my first object. And this one is simply going to be a vector with the numbers 5 through 10. Therefore, I'm gonna state my first object equals 5 double dot 10. This is going to be a crucial moment for you when you are totally new to R or even new to programming. Many things are now happening simultaneously, and it is so different to Excel or SPSS. First of all, I want to make clear that you can of course also use an arrow for your assignment. In this case, I'm using the equal sign, which works as well. I will now make sure that the mouse is in the line where the code is, and then I will run it with this icon over here. Alright, so let's take a deep breath and let's see which surprises RStudio is going to dish out to us. So that was the first line of code we have been running together. Loads of change in our interface. Basically, there are now three things happening or not happening. The first one is that this code was now sent from the script window into the console, where the calculation took place, as we can see with this code snippet down here at the very bottom of our screen. But second, in the console we do not really see what is in this new object. There is no result, no real output as you might expect. But number three, and this might have escaped your notice, we have the new object now in our environment. This is confirmed with this entry over here. The computer now recognizes an object called my first object. If we now want to learn more about this object, we have several ways in how we can do this. We can simply type the name of the object in the next line, or we can use a semicolon and put it in the same line. A semicolon is indicating a totally new code line. So if we run this, we would now finally get the output in the console down here. It is the numbers 5 through 10. That is indeed correct, because the double dots over here in our code indicate a series of numbers from 5 to 10. That was one way in how to display the data. A more sophisticated way would be over here in the environment. Now, this is a simple and short vector, therefore the whole vector is shown. We get the information that is an integer vector. int or int stands for integers, which are whole numbers, numbers without a decimal. And we also learn that this vector has a length of 6. There are 6 integers in it. We can now go a step further. Let's simply plot those 6 integers against its index, which is the position from 1 to 6 in the vector. Therefore, we are simply using the plot function. This gives a XY plot per default for this sort of data. If we run it, the command is again sent to the console, but this time the console passes the data on. It is sent right to the plot tab over here, where the scatter plot is displayed. It has 6 dots. X values are the index numbers, and Y values the integers we provided in my first object. Since RStudio programming requires many different windows, it is important to know how to resize the windows. I get those questions from time to time, therefore I will demonstrate it here. It is actually quite simple. You have the icons to maximize and minimize over here. Watch out, because sometimes a window might be fully maximized, making its counterpart disappear. In those cases, simply click this button over here and you will have 4 fields again. The same goes for the lateral, left versus right, size ratio. Just grab the center line and distribute the lateral screen space as you wish. RStudio is really flexible when it comes to segmenting your display. Now, each time you open an RStudio instance, you will see that there is some general text about R. The text contains some info on the license, liability regulations and version ID. Of course, after you have run code or in case you're irritated by the text, just click in the console and press Ctrl+L, which will clear the console so that you get an empty console window again. Depending on your screen and how good your eyesight is, the letters and numbers might be too small on the screen. You can actually magnify your code. Therefore, you would go to View and you can select Zoom in or Zoom out. You can do this several times because this is a step-by-step zooming tool. So keep this tool in mind when you have to deal with a small screen or your default setting is not satisfying to you. Another important feature you have to keep in mind is the working directory. When you perform extended analysis, you will likely import and export several files. It makes sense that these files all go into the same directory. This is going to be your working directory, the default directory R is going to store files in. The easiest way to set the working directory is via Session Set Working Directory, and then you can choose the directory. Now, of course, you do not need to set the working directory each time you run RStudio. When you only make some small tests and you do not need several files, you can just import and save files with manually selected directories. Alright guys, I hope that you enjoyed our first walk through the RStudio interface. It surely is exciting to do this stuff for the first time. Don't be scared even when it might look too technical at the beginning. I do know that R is totally different to Excel or SPSS, but once you get behind it, you will quickly realize that it is much faster and more powerful than those fully click supported software products. In this video we learned that RStudio is a graphical user interface for R. It makes your life much easier, especially as a beginner. I showed you what those 4 different windows can do for you. We even took a look at the 5 tabs at the bottom right window. We were setting up a new script. We were running a simple example with my first object, which we even plotted against its index. And I showed you how to resize your RStudio windows, how to zoom in and out to make code better visible, and we even were setting up a new working directory.